right, thank you, Jay. Good evening, everybody. Put a smile on your face if you don't have one. If you do, put an extra smile on your face. We're glad that you're with us this evening. We hope and pray that you had a good day. It's been a good day. God has blessed us with the ability to see a new day, and we are thankful for that. I know you are. And just continue to count your many blessings. And while we're all, I guess if you don't mind me using this word, we're all kind of sick of this pandemic and sick of being quarantined. It is still a reality. And so just smile and count your blessings and the fact that God has given to us much. If you've been with us on Wednesday nights, and I hope that you have, and we would encourage you to, ask others to invite them to listen as well, that we've been studying out of the book of Mark. Tonight I want us to look at and finish the 5th chapter of the book of Mark. There's two great stories that the way Mark tells them are intertwined. Now, we might want to back up for just a minute and say that this is sort of in the midst of, as Mark is telling the story of the life of Christ, remember he's telling his account different than Matthew and different than Luke and different than John did. It's all because of what point they're trying to make. Mark shows Jesus as being a doer. He shows the action of Jesus. And in Mark chapter 5, what we're going to close out with tonight, we're in the midst of, we've already seen 2 miracles, and we're going to see 2 more tonight. But Mark is showing Jesus as being a man of power. He's a servant, he's a man of action, but he's showing Jesus' power. And we'll review that as we get to the end. But just as a quick reminder, a couple of weeks ago we talked about Jesus stilling the sea. And then last week we talked about Jesus casting out demons out of the swine. Well, it says in verse 21 of Mark chapter 5 that Jesus crossed again across the Sea of Galilee by boat, and there's a great multitude that gathered around him. And there was a man that was considered a ruler or one of the rulers of the synagogue. Remember, the synagogue in any city in which there were at least 10 Jewish men, there could be more, of course, but there had to be a minimum of 10, that they would build a synagogue, and this was the place of worship for the Jew of the first century. This was the place of gathering, if you will, of coming together. The word synagogue is the idea, the word itself has the idea of coming together. And so this is where they came together. This is where they worshiped. This is where the law was read. This is where a teacher would teach a lesson. And they, as we said, so they would assemble, they would worship. And there were those that were in charge of keeping the building, maintaining the building, but also maintaining the worship service and the order of the worship service. This man is one of those individuals. He's a ruler in the synagogue. And notice that it says Jairus or Jairus, depending upon how you want to say it. But Jairus was his name. And when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. Evidently, he realized who Jesus was, and he begged Jesus. It says he begged him, and he begged him earnestly. My daughter, she lies near the point of death, he says. And so he says, come lay your hands on her that she may be healed and she will live. Now, think about this man for just a minute. Think about his faith. His faith is the Jewish belief, but nevertheless, he's heard probably enough about Jesus, and he's heard enough about his abilities that now he comes and he falls down, and it's almost the idea of worship of Jesus. He falls down at the feet of Jesus. He begs him to come. He has faith in Jesus. You come and you'll be able to heal her. My daughter is about to die, and you'll heal her and she'll be able to live. And so he has faith. And as Jesus was evidently, according to verse 24, Jesus was about to follow him to his house. The people were around him. And imagine now, if you will, Jesus constantly, while he was in public and in the public eye these 3 years, Jesus was constantly surrounded with a throng of people. And this would, of course, been draining. This would have been limiting at times. It would have been very hard to travel, but Jesus did all of this. But as Jesus has this great throng of people around him, there's a woman who is hemorrhaging. She has a flow of blood. We'll just call it that. She has, as the text says, a flow of blood. She's had it for 12 years. And it says that she suffered many things from many physicians. She spent all that she had, but she was none the better. Matter of fact, Mark says she even grew worse. Now think about this poor lady. She has a physical ailment. She has a physical ailment which evidently cannot be healed. She has spent all of her money, and she is no better at the end of year 12 than she was at the beginning of this problem. Matter of fact, she's a little worse. She is spent, probably physically. She is spent as far as emotionally. She is spent from a standpoint of maybe even spiritually. She is spent from a standpoint of finances, and she's had it. But she's trying, as any of us would try. She's trying to find help, and she's trying to find a healer. And so when she says that she heard about Jesus, why not? What did she have to lose? She came to him, and she came to him from behind, and she touched his garment. Notice what she said. If only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well. She evidently had this faith in Jesus and faith in his ability, but she saw his greatness. And because of the crowd of people, she couldn't get to him. But if I can but touch his clothes, I don't have to have him lay his hands on me. I don't have to have him talk to me. I just need to touch him. If I can touch him, I'm going to be made well. You might say there's a bit of optimism. There's a bit of faith. There's a bit of hope. But I want you to think about her from the standpoint of, as she comes to Jesus, she comes to him basically as a nobody. She is tired. She is spent. Oh, something we probably need to throw in from the standpoint of, if she's Jewish, for 12 years, she's had this hemorrhaging of blood, which means that she was considered ceremonially unclean according to Leviticus 15. And thus she could not worship. She could not have entered into the synagogue to worship God. And so she was ostracized from the people because, according to Leviticus 15, if anybody touched her, they would be considered ceremonially unclean. And they would have to go through the washing, the purification of washing in order to be pure, in order so that they could go and worship God in the synagogue. And so people didn't have anything to do with her. But when she touched him, verse 29, all of a sudden the nobody is a somebody. Because it says immediately the fountain of blood dried up. She felt it in her body. She realized, oh, wait a minute, I've been healed. But Jesus immediately, knowing that someone had touched him. And I wrote a note in this little text that I'm using that just simply said the awareness of Jesus, the self-awareness of Jesus, that some power, according to Luke, that some power had gone out of him. And so he turned to the crowd and he asked one simple question: who touched me? Who touched my clothes? And his disciples, and this is a little bit of, I see a little humor in this. Maybe I shouldn't, but I see a little humor in this because they're saying, Lord, let's think about this. There's this huge crowd of people around us, and you're wanting to know one simple thing: who touched me? Have you ever been in a crowd of people? Maybe you went to a ball game, or maybe you went to a public event, and everybody leaves at one time, right? And you leave at one time, and there's people in front of you. You can't hardly walk. There's people behind you that are stepping on your feet. There's people all to the side of you. There's people literally around you close. Well, the disciples said, Lord, how in the world? Who are we going to find? How in the world could you ask who touched me? But Jesus evidently was determined to find out. And he looked around, and I wonder if his look, what kind of look he gave. Was it a pleasant look? Was it a calm look? Was it a disturbed look? Was it an intense look? Nevertheless, we do not know. But this woman, I think, to her good, fesses up. Now, notice what it says about her. She's feared, she's trembling, but she knew what had happened to her, and instead of running away, she came. She fell down with the idea really of worship, and she told him, she confessed what had happened, what she had done, and probably her whole story. And as she confessed her whole story, notice the response that Jesus gave to her. It's really, in my way of thinking, it's really a tribute of her faith, and it's a praise for her faith. Daughter. What a comforting title. Now all of a sudden she's gone from a nobody to a somebody. She's daughter. Your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. I couldn't help, and once again I wrote my notes, the warmth, the compassion, the appreciation that Jesus had for this woman. And so she went from really, in many ways, a nobody to a somebody. And while he was speaking, though, this ruler, Jairus, came to Jesus and said, let's go. But there were those from his house that came to him and told him the terrible news. Your daughter is dead. Don't trouble the teacher. Don't trouble Jesus any further. Don't bring him to your house. We don't need him anymore. It's too late. It's already over. She's passed away. But Jesus hears what these individuals have told Jairus. And so he says to Jairus, don't be afraid. Only believe. What a statement Jesus makes. It's going to be all right. The calming effect, the peaceful effect, and the hope that Jesus gave to him. My father passed away in 2006. Dad had some troubles with cancer, and Dad had gone through some treatments. He'd relapsed. He'd gone through some more treatments. And I took him home from the hospital. I had talked to the doctor. The doctor talked like he was going to be all right. I'll never forget when we got home, I took Dad, I helped him get out of the car. My father looked back to where his garden was, and my dad loved to garden. And my dad looked back at his garden, and he says, will I ever be able to do that again? And I said, well, just, you get your strength back up, sure, you can get out there. The misinformation that the doctor had given me allowed me to say that because that was the information that he gave me. It wasn't but a few days later that my father passed away. But I could tell that by the things that I told my father there, that there was a renewed sense of hope. Can I ever do that again? Jesus tells this man, just keep on believing. Don't stop. And he told everybody else, all this crowd of people, he being Jesus, you stay here. And he took with him Peter, James, John, the brother of James. This seemed to be an inner circle that Jesus carried with him on several different places. And they came to the house of Jairus, and they saw a lot of people there, and they saw all these people wailing, and they saw these people weeping. I don't know. The text really doesn't tell us. I do know in first century times that there were those that were professional mourners, professional wailers. I wonder if they had already been summoned to come. But there's this crowd of people at the house. These people are already wailing. They are already throwing their grief, if you will, their grief party that they had. Jesus makes this statement. Why make this commotion and weep? This child is not dead, but sleeping. There's a word of hope. There's a word of reassurance. There's a word of comfort. But notice what happens. They ridiculed him. They laughed at him. And then Jesus put them all outside. He took Jairus. He took Jairus' wife. And those who were with him, Peter, James, and John. And he entered to the room where the child was laid. He took the child by the hand. He said, Talitha Cumi. Now remember, Jesus spoke a form of Arabic. And so he says, Talitha Cumi, which simply means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately, Mark always uses this word. He uses it so many times. Immediately the girl arose and walked. She was 12 years old, we know. But notice that those that had ridiculed, those that had laughed, when Jesus said she's not dead, she's just sleeping, all of a sudden they were greatly astonished. But Jesus told them, don't tell anyone. And so he said that something should be given to this little girl to eat. There's a lot in there, but there's two thoughts I want you to think, I want you to take away with you from these two great stories. First of all, I want you to understand and I want you to remember that it's important that this first lady, the lady that had the 12 years, the issue of blood, that she shows us really how we need to come to the Lord. With humility, we come knowing that we're nobody, knowing that Jesus can save us and that Jesus will save us, and knowing that when He does, we go from a nobody to a somebody. We're His children, Matthew 12, verse 50. We're part of His family, 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15. And thus, being His children, part of His family, we are His. And so then we must go and tell everybody. So we go from a nobody to a somebody to basically being an anybody that should go and spread that message that Jesus saves, that Jesus is our hope, and Jesus is hope for the hopeless. See, she had nowhere else to go, but she had faith and she came. And Jesus, being her hope for a hopeless lady, filled that hope to the very brink. That's the first lesson we need to learn. Jesus, our hope and our healer. But then the second lesson, and you might in many ways say, well, it's no laughing matter. But it's also the idea of hope. And that is that there's really no hopeless case for Christ. We have no problem so great that the Lord cannot handle our problems. Whether our problems are marital or alcohol or drug related or child abuse or financial worries or depression or despair or doubt or guilt or grief, Jesus can solve our problems. He who overcame if you will, the last great, what seemed to be victor, death, can overcome any problem that we have. And just as He healed Jairus' daughter from what seemed to be, from the people's standpoint, a hopeless situation to being the hope of the world. He is our hope as well. And so Jesus reminds us through this miracle, and Mark, by recording it for us, tells us, look to Jesus. When you feel down, when you feel out, look to Jesus. Jesus has the answers. The world may laugh you to scorn. You may feel as if you are a nobody. But Jesus has the answers. He is the hope of the world. Jesus worked wonders. He stilled the tempest. And so thus, Mark showed that he had power over nature. He was able to cast out demons to show that he had all spiritual power. Tonight, Mark told us about this lady who was hemorrhaging and how that Jesus can heal us from our sins. And that Jairus' daughter shows us that Jesus has all power, as he has power over what is considered the last of the great victors. And so, death, where is your victory? O grave, where is your sting? Remember what Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 15? Jesus had power over death. And isn't it sad that we'll fast forward right quick for just a second, and that is that there were so many that were amazed when they went after Jesus was crucified and found the tomb empty. Jesus had already shown them through this young girl that he had power over death. Faith is an ongoing, growing process, and that's a whole different lesson. Basically, though, Mark shows us that Jesus and his power and his help of individuals is always there. And so, may we be mindful of that. May we continue to move forward, knowing that we have the hope that Jesus offers to us all, and the power that lies within him that he shares with us as we follow him day by day. What a great blessing and what a great Savior we have. I hope that you'll be with us Sunday. Sunday morning we're going to talk about winning over guilt. I haven't announced this. We started this past Sunday a series of lessons entitled Winning, and we talked about, this past Sunday, we talked about winning over sin or winning over temptation. This Sunday we're going to talk about winning over guilt, and we'll reveal the rest of the series as we go. Sunday night we're going to talk about Romans chapter 12, and what do you do when people do something bad against you? How do you react? Or what should you do, and how should you react? We thank you for listening tonight. Remember those that are sick. Remember those that need the hope of Jesus. Share it with them. Share with them these two stories tonight. May God bless you and keep you is my prayer, and we hope that you have a great rest of the week.